The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of The Joyful Friar. This is your host, Father Nathan Castle. And boy, do I have fun for you today, because we have Dr. Raymond Moody, who has been a hero of mine since 1975. Book Life After Life came out. I devoured that. I didn't know that I was going to have a lifelong interest in death and dying and afterlife, but I was, like so many people when that book first came out, were enthralled with it. So we're happy to welcome you today, Dr. Moody. I'm going to go through a little bit of your intro that describes in brief what's now a very long career. During your medical rounds, while you both had a PhD in philosophy and an MD, I think at the age of 30, is that right?
That's right. And now I can see, as you can too, how, bad that was. I mean, I spent my life with a nose in a book, which has had wonderful outcomes too, but it did cut me off from other people in a way.
Well, you must have been a good listener. And did you start collecting your afterlife stories or your out of body consciousness stories when studying medicine?
Actually, it was when I was an undergraduate philosophy student. I had heard about this when I was 18 in philosophy and Plato's Republic. And then I read the Phaedo a couple of months later, which just transformed my life more so than the Republic. It's like, holy mackerel, the Phaedo, how did he come up with that, right? And, it's just, I remember at 18 reading that phrase in there. He said, philosophy is a rehearsal for dying. And I remember it was just like my response was right on. Now at 60 years later, I think about an 18-year-old how did that happen? But then I realized it's like in there, Plato was talking about how philosophers were always trying to seal off our senses so we can read or think. For years, I've been staying down in the basement as a teenager reading my books. And my sister had a stereo above me, and I had to put earplugs in to read, and that that was my specific association. That the Phaedo, he's so right. If you just sort of think about death all the time and meditate on it, mull over it, it's a stage of development. Actually, it's like death involves a further developmental step beyond what we experience in this life.
Well, you're now 78, isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've packed a lot into this lifetime. You have a number of different books, and even though they all have something to do with death, afterlife, consciousness studies, all of that, your most recent one, well, there's a couple. You have this one, Making Sense of Nonsense. I think that came out in 2020. Would you describe that just a little bit?
Yeah, that's my favorite book. What got me on the intellectual and spiritual path, I think, was looking through a telescope when I was 7 or 8. And I was just an inveterate amateur astronomer, reading about astronomy all the time. About at that same time, my favorite authors were Dr. Seuss, Lewis Carroll, and Edward Lear, and a guy named Carl Barks. Nobody knows. It's Spielberg and Lucas, who read Donald Duck and Uncle Scrooge comics as I did. It just transformed so many people's lives. And in that context, I had already kind of appreciated that nonsense is not anything bad. Matter of fact, it's something very stimulating, and can be spiritual, as you know, from glossolalia or koans. And during that same period, I was looking through my telescope, and I had the experience you did too, or the thought you did too. Everybody does that. What size is this thing we're in?
Yes.
So your mind zips out to the wall. But then you say, just a minute, doesn't there have to be something on the other side of the wall?
Yes.
And that doesn't make the alternative that it goes on for and ever and ever. That doesn't make any sense either. So I was just very reconciled at age 8 with my insight that we're living in this nonsense environment. But that's okay. It's not frightening to me.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated what I have discovered. Nathan, I would really love to hear your critique of this, but one of the big cognitive deficits that's practically collective and variable, and at least the United States and Germany too. Unintelligibility is something very unsettling or very bad. But to me, it's just a delightful, number one, the mental experience you get when you hear something nonsensical. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toad, stood Gyre and Gimble in the wave. And like Alice said, well, it's very pretty, and it seems to fill my head with ideas, but I don't know what they are. And that is the experience. And I was so intrigued by that. And you can see how when I went to philosophy at the University of Virginia and studied philosophy, that I fit right in, because especially analytic philosophy, it's one of the big concepts in it is nonsense. And
doesn't Alice in Wonderland, doesn't she say something about having so many nonsensical ideas before breakfast?
yeah, that's one of the queens. I think it's like that. I always have six impossible.
Yep,
I
that's it.
always believe six impossible things.
Impossible things before breakfast. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating. And I think, in terms of the things you and I are, I think a big mistake in Western thought took place between my hero Plato, had first distinguished between the literal and the figurative modes of language, and assigned the notion of truth to the literal mode. But he was also working in the Parmenides. He understood that nonsense had a structure of its own and qualities of its own, that it's in the Parmenides, they talk about one thing can be more nonsensical than another thing. Nonsense makes people laugh, and Plato sort of illustrated that even though it's nonsensical, it creates a path of mentation. But, he didn't have the logic. That came with his pupil, Aristotle. Aristotle, just because of his amazing personality, this was too big a step for him. And his favorite term for nonsense was random talk. But I think a very quick argument could show that far from being random talk, nonsense is actually not a sublinguistic phenomenon. If you think of the ordinary meaningful language as a horizontal line in front of you, most people think of nonsense as something sublinguistic. Actually, nonsense is something that is up above the level of ordinary meaningful language.
Which, in my experience in Christian prayer, when praying in tongues occurs, when praying in tongues with a group of people, like often there'll be a song that will have lyrics, and so the lyrics have a certain logic to them. They're describing something, and then you get to the end of the lyrics, and very often the song leader will then just strum on a guitar or play random. They're not exactly random keys on a piano because they're still lovely. It's not just banging, but they move from the logic of the lyric to just musical sound, and then a whole assembly will start to sing in tongues. And then they're not singing the same thing. They're singing different things. And sometimes you can be next to somebody and hear that they're singing in a foreign language. I mean, a human language. Others are, when I do that, it's nonsense syllables. It's not another language. But it's sublime. It's above logic.
It's just like it's that ecstatic experience it gives you after a little while. I mean, you don't need an ecstatic experience to get it started. No. But after you do it for a while, it just brings on this indescribable, just like William James' ineffability, indescribable kind of experience. And I can easily understand that people might, that state of mind might open people more to, contact with God. I mean, I haven't had that specifically because I pray all the time, but yeah. I could understand that somebody who never had an experience with God, that kind of mind state of glossolalia would open them up.
Yeah, and even though the words that are being formed with the tongue, the ideas that are going on in consciousness are higher than that anyway. They're really about unity and love and feeling awe. that sometimes anybody listening to this or watching us has had the experience of awe at one time or another where something was just so awesome there was no words. I teach the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and usually the last one in the classical list of 7 of them is the gift of awe. I invite people to ponder it and ask for maybe the increase of it. A lot of the pettiness of human behavior falls away. Your son was just in the room with you, and you nearly teared up just talking about when he came to you. If people have the gift of awe, a lot of what annoys us about one another and stuff kind of falls away, because you look at this person and they might be doing something annoying, but but good God, look, there,
I
and
know.
it goes beyond words. Your love for them just goes beyond words.
Everyone is a universe unto themselves. And I mean, I've never really met anybody that I really knew who I didn't love. I mean, it's like people can be annoying when you don't really get. And the exception, I guess, is sociopaths. That's hard to. You can never feel like you get in touch with them because it's like what they're all doing. Instead of responding to your questions, is that they are trying to figure out what you want to hear, right? So they can play
Yeah.
it back to you. And you never get a sense of a person with that. But even with paranoid schizophrenia, I worked as a forensic psychiatrist in a maximum security unit for the criminally insane with mostly paranoid schizophrenic killers or uh, people who had done terrible things because of mental disturbance. And yeah, even those people who've done these gosh awful terrible things, and you could find that lovable
Lovable
core.
person. Yeah. Well, you and I both share a background with Aristotle and Aquinas, and one of the things that Aquinas teaches is that God still loves Satan for 2 reasons.
Mhm.
And I usually, when I'm teaching in front of a group, I do a lot of retreat work. I try to tease it out of them. What are those 2 reasons? I bet we can come up with it. And they always do. One of them is that they'll say, well, Satan is God's creature. And I'll say, yeah, but a specific kind of creature. What kind of creature? Oh, it's his child. And God is a loving father that never stops loving a child at all. And then the other one is simply that God does nothing but love, because God is nothing but love.
That's right. And also the victim of Satan, the the process is, doesn't it just drive them right back to God?
It can. I try to think unitively. I'm affected by Ken Wilber, the idea that he kind of reintroduces of consciousness being either unitive or dualistic. And anytime we move into dualistic, we move into us and them thinking. And I just believe the universe is one. It's
Yeah.
and so is the country. It's supposed to be anyway. It aspires to be united, which means one. So when we're at our best, we're not fighting each other. We're looking for commonality and trying to improve the lot of everybody.
It's like I had a lot of patience, and I'm sure you've seen this too. It's like dealing with the elderly. I was a geriatric psychiatrist in a VIP clinic, which means it's not elitism. It's just the fact that the it's not a good thing to have the chief of police or the mayor or the local celebrities stand at the door with at the mental health clinic with the rest of us, right? So I had a year where I did that, and people had to be brought in by the back, and they were older. And it
Yeah,
was almost always it was like situational stress or loneliness, right?
yeah.
And these were very accomplished people, and repeatedly during that year, I heard this, Raymond, the older I get, the more I look back at the life I had, this uncanny feeling it's been a play or a drama or a story or novel, whatever. I get that. It's like, because consciousness itself is narrative structured. Think about it. It's like whenever anything happens to you, you significant, your mind just automatically weaves it into your continuing life story, right?
Yeah.
And to a degree, when people have their life review, that's narrative, except that it's narrative frozen in place, clipped up into lots of pieces, put out there in a hologram.
For people who are listening that aren't really familiar with NDEs and so on,
Yeah.
because the life review is a very important part of the near-death experience for a lot of folks.
It is. And basically, near death experience, there is a significant number of people who, when they come close to death, in the course, for example, of a cardiac arrest from which they're revived, when they come back, even though their heart was stopped beating, the doctors thought they were dead or whatever, that what they say is, when I was dying, I heard that doctor say I was dead. And they would say, in one format or another, they'd say, but I have never been so alive
Uh,
as when I heard that doctor say I'm dead.
yeah.
And so it's a zipping up into a whole different higher level of consciousness. And then people say that they feel they get out of their bodies, they see their own body down below being resuscitated. They can understand not by sounds or voices, but from picking up on what the doctors and nurses present are thinking is how they experience it as thoughts. And that they realize that, oh, I'm dying. And so with that realization, they enter into states of consciousness that no matter how articulate or bright they are, people just say, I have no words to describe it.
Yes.
But the closest they can come is they say, it's like, I got out of my body, I went through this tunnel, and I came out on the other side into this incredibly brilliant, warm, loving light. More love than I'd ever felt in my life. And in that light, I met relatives and friends of mine who died, where they are not in a bodily form, but in a form nonetheless, but not material. And they recognize this person more by the thoughts and feelings and the personal presence. And then at some point, everything else in the physical zone just kind of disappears. And they find themselves surrounded by a timeless, time stands still. This is no more perception of time. And they perceive every single thing they have ever done in this hologram, but it's all at once. And it's often in the presence of a compassionate, loving light that people in our society tend to identify as Christ. Some say God or an angel, but it's all the same description. And they say it becomes immediately aware that this being can see everything in this panel that you're watching, but still loves you.
Yeah.
And it's people say that when you see this, you see it, from your perspective, what you did, but the more interesting thing is you see that action from the other person's point of view and feeling.
Yes.
Then this being who was in, often just sort of, they say that there's no words, but this being formulated as a question. They say the question, how have you learned to love? What have you done you want to show? Let's talk about your development in love, or, concepts like this is timeless. I mean, it takes at least as long as your life plus thinking about it.
For people whose near-death experience clinically didn't last very long. It might be that somebody was given CPR and they came back relatively quickly, but then they come back with these stories that felt like they lasted a long time.
That's right. Like a whole different experience in a different world. People want to jump to the logical conclusion from this experience that there is life after death. Well, as you and I know, no, it's more complicated than that. And I've never been able to find anybody who thought otherwise on this once they thought about it. But what I think you can definitely draw as a valid conclusion from these life reviews is that at least for some of us, at least for many of us, life is a two-phase process, right? You live it forward as the protagonist, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then there's an 180-degree turnaround, and you re-witness everything from the point of view of the other characters.
Yes. Let me give an example that I've often used because I've heard it from people. You and I both belong to IANDS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies, and when you're at conferences or engaging with people that have had near-death experiences, many of whom have had a life review, they'll say, I was brought back to a scene from high school or junior high where we were all being sarcastic and sassy with one another, and I made some sort of joke at someone else's expense, and they laughed along because the context didn't allow for anything else. They didn't want to give away that they were really hurt. But then you're shown that the comment that you thought was just silliness and was humor at someone else's expense actually did harm them. And after that, it had other effects in that person's life. Or conversely, it doesn't have to be a bad thing you did. It can be, in the Christian scriptures, in the Jesus story, Jesus will say, he'll say, one of these days you're going to understand. There's going to come a day when you're going to see that you had an impact on people that you didn't realize. And you're going to say, Lord, when did I see you hungry? Or when did I clothe you or whatever? And he'll say, what you did for the least, you did for me. It's another example kind of a life review, how you get to see the impact that you had for good or ill on other people.
That's right. And it's I guess partly because I've heard so many thousands of these stories beginning in 1965 that it's mostly it becomes incorporated in you. That the way I think of it is like when you're a kid, you hear this thing, oh, the happiest life is a life of service to others, right? And then when you're a kid, most people I did, you hear it as an ideal. Okay. Then you get up toward midlife and you think back on that, and then you think of it more as an aspiration, right? Yeah. But by the age of 78, at least in my case, and I think a lot of other people have learned it becomes a fact of experience. It's just from experience, you learn that whenever you're focusing on yourself, you're miserable. Because something I learned as both a psychiatrist and a person is a simple formula. I've mentioned this to people in many parts of the world, and everybody's like, and the simple equation is ego equals pain. Okay? And if you think about it, anytime your ego is involved in a situation, it's always something painful. And you just learn by experience, hey, I feel good because I did this for this person today or whatever. So it becomes, like I said, just factual and rather than a moral thing, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the effect it's had on me, one of the many effects.
With all these people that didn't have a near-death experience, they had a death experience. They actually died. And, they come to me in the night, and the ones that I get are people that died sudden violent trauma deaths.
Yeah.
My prayer partners and I are at the end of the healthcare continuum where from the moment that they suddenly died violently, they've been helped. I'll bet you do that kind of help after you die. You'd be a natural. You'd be helping.
Well, I probably would, or else more. I'm probably going to go to George Ritchie's library. I mean, all these people with extremely lengthy plays, they see these whole level of existence, which consists kind of an institute of higher learning.
Well, you might learn early on how to do more than one thing at a time and be in more than one place at a time. Then you wouldn't have to choose.
That's right. I love what Bernardo Clairvaux said, and let's see. He said, some seek knowledge for the sake of knowledge, and that is curiosity. He said, some seek knowledge to be known and praised, and that is vanity. And he said, and some seek knowledge to help others, and that is love. And I'm closer to that now. I've never been in that middle zone. I mean, I kind of think I don't like attention per se. I like, helping people and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't like, it makes me uncomfortable for the attention to turn to me because I'm sort of unsocial. But at the same time, I've got where I see that more and more. I see that what Bernard meant. You feel really good when you can help somebody with knowledge. But it's still, to me, it's just an inherent pleasure today of learning
Well, you might think of yourself as that bookworm kid that hunker down in the basement with your philosophy books or whatever. But remember, the only time that I've known you in person was at a conference. We were at that one that was in Portland a few years ago, an Afterlife
Oh yeah.
conference. And I paid the extra to be with you at the cocktail party. These things are always fundraisers because almost all of us are nonprofits trying to figure out how to do what we do. Out of that, I got a photo with you. Can you see that? For those of you that are listening to a podcast, it's a picture of Raymond on one side and Eben Alexander on the other, and me in the middle. And I had it framed and I put it on the wall of my bedroom where I could see it. I do most of my prayer in the bedroom. I'm trying to follow the Great Commission at the end of Matthew's Gospel to go out to all the world and tell the good news. So when I started doing this as my main work, I thought, how have other people done it? And I looked at you. I mean, you New York Times bestseller, not because you want your name in lights, but because you wanted people to know what you had to say.
As you can imagine, Nathan, I just had zero. I mean, it never occurred to me this might sell more than the first printing, which was 19,000. I remember one day walking home from medical school, calculating, wow, if they sell 19,000 of these, that will be, some enormous amount of money, like $2,000, whatever. But then, it took me aback when it was published in November written in 74, published in November of 75. And just like weeks later, I mean, it was getting, I heard this broadcast from Europe through a shortwave radio. I said, well, we know this must be true because it was told us by the eminent Dr. Raymond Moody. And I thought, why am I the eminent Dr. Raymond Moody? It's like, because I wrote this, I mean, oh my God, it was so circular.
Yes, and you were the eminent 30-year-old or something like that, weren't you?
That's right. And so, I mean, it was a good adventure, but because, an introvert, you can imagine the stresses this brought to me. It was unanticipated.
Yeah.
But there was a going thing for me on that was that, I've had a sort of strange career, I guess. I just like doing a lot of things, but one of my initial desires in life was to be an astronomer and a comedian.
What was the second one? Astronomer and what?
And a comedian.
Comedian. I was hearing Canadian, and I thought, well, that can't be right. Comedian.
Yeah, comedian. And I always loved doing it. Humor to me is so great. And so I really daydreamed about that all my life. After I went to UVA and, went into philosophy instead of astronomy, and then got my PhD in philosophy in 1969, professor of philosophy for a while. And during this time, people kept asking me to come to do I don't think of it as an act. I mean, it has a reality to it to me. I sort of, in 1966, came up with this little town. And, they say it's imaginary. To me, it's real. And people think it's funny. And Eben and Karen really like it too. Mm-hmm. And so, but in about, I guess, 1974 or 75, when all this was going on, I was my residency in 1976. But during that time, see, it was exploding. I mean, I was getting too many offers to come and perform. And it was impossible because I was entering my psychiatry residency. So I had to give it up. But it was a big part of life to me. And I think that humor is not only, ecstatic and funny and fun, but it's also a great way of exploring concept, Nathan, at the edge of intelligibility. It's like that's what people do with the afterlife. You think of all the jokes, right?
Yeah.
And the humor is one way of trying to comprehend it.
Yes. There's a lot of humor in the work that I end up doing. A lot of the times when I'm with a prayer partner and we're helping somebody move, they show me a little dream and I write down a paragraph. And like takes us about 30 to 45 minutes to help somebody do the little crossing that we assist them with. It's really like being the discharge staff in a medical center. that you just need to help them collect their things, gather their thoughts, what's going to happen next, who's going to come for you, and like that. But very often I'll ask their guardian, what I would call their guardian angel. Other people would say spirit guide or whatever, but I just say guardian angel because there's someone who's been with them their entire life who knows their story because they were present to it. And I'll say, before we meet this person who brought this story, could we please talk to their guardian to give a little clarity? Because dreamscapes, the nature of a dream has some intangibility about it. you and we have a job to do. I want to do it right. So explain to me, is this person masculine or feminine? Were they in this country or another? A few little details. But sometimes the guardians will come through and they'll be really funny. Some of them will be very task oriented and somebody that you might have met in a philosophy class. Others would be somebody that was in the theater department that just is full of laughter and fun and excited about what their charge is going to do that day.
Yeah, and God deals with me humorously. I mean, He has a great sense of humor.
Yeah,
and just unbelievable mind bending. And the way He does it is like it's often instructional or insight provoking. He puts me into humorous situations because of my own devices. And then I get desperate. Oh, why did I get into this? Then I have to surrender. Okay. I was going through, and then it's always thoughts of suicide. I mean, I'm so obsessive. And then it's like when I pray, it just often was gone. And first I really honed in on that was back in 1976 or 7. I was really struggling with something I said I'd do. And oh my God, just politeness, just terrible. It's spiraling. So, oh my, I was so distressed. And I just couldn't. So I just said, you do it. I turned it over. And then it just went away. And now I don't even remember what it was.
Mm.
But the next day I was seeing George Ritchie. And I told him what happened. And George said, surrender is the most powerful prayer.
It defeats the ego.
It does. It does. Yeah, I have the strangest thing about God, and I just feel like I'm imposing on him. I mean, I know it's irrational and crazy, but I feel it. And one thing we do is we call on Saint Anthony to help us on misplaced objects. And so my daughter, who's Native American Blackfeet from Montana, adopted at birth, and she's a very hardy person, as the Blackfeet friends of ours told us she is. You're going to find a very assertive person here. And, the moment she was born, she was ours, but, it quickly came to pass. And so, I told her years ago about St. Anthony. And so, maybe a couple of years ago, I mentioned it to her, and she said, yeah, well, yeah, it works. But she said, all it does, it just reminds me of where I put it. Right. But then I was assuming that was same attitude. And about 3 weeks ago, she mentioned St. Anthony. Oh, she said, oh, yeah, that's real. There's no way it could happen otherwise. So, she's convinced. Yeah.
Well, St. Anthony's been a part of my life since childhood because my grandmother was a mystic. She lived next door, and she talked to him all the time. They were just buddies, Anthony and Joseph the carpenter. She was very big on Joseph. She rewired her house at 65, I think, and bought Time Life books through the mail and put a bathroom in her garage so she wouldn't track mud into the house. And she would just call on whoever was good at this stuff. And she put St. Joseph in charge and said, whoever knows how to do this, come sit by me and we're going to get this done.
That is crazy. And I do the same thing about God. Like, I don't want to bother God with this. Well, how can I bother God?
Well, you might be assuming that you're taking up their time. Like when I met you in Portland, I'm not one of those people that's going to go to a conference and try to talk to the speaker right after the keynote. People rush the stage and they usually have some like bouncer people that try to keep you from being overwhelmed. And so I just won't do that. I just can't. But when you're talking to God, you don't have to wait in line. And you don't
That's
have to try to get a fragment of God's attention, but you can,
right.
he can just stop and be with you. In fact, that's one of the gifts I think that you have. I watched you at that conference, and you might be an introvert, and that was clear to me. I'm an introvert. But when you look at somebody, you're giving them their full attention, your full attention.
I do. I mean, I pay attention to people, but mostly it's with a certain amount of scaredness.
Uh,
I mean, I've always been. It's like I'm a few person. I love people, but it's like at the cocktail party. I bet you do too. No, you probably can't from your
I like
position.
to bartend because then the people come to
Uh,
me. It
yeah,
takes away the awkwardness of having to circle the room.
yeah. Well, what I do is I try to find the darkest corner and hope nobody.
I'd probably be there with you. Listen, I want to ask you about, you said it was in 1965 when how did you start listening to near-death experience stories? Lots of other people were in the same hospitals and clinics and things, but why were you the one that listened and wrote it down?
I do sense now that God was involved, no question. And let me, this is going to be a few minutes, but it's just, I just can't put it together for myself, and maybe you can. But I was not religiously raised. I didn't, well, wasn't an atheist. I just didn't think about God. I thought about astronomy. And reading Plato's Republic in 1962, September, I could show you where it was on the page that I became a philosophy major, and I was intrigued by the fact that Plato thought that the question of life after death, which I'd never paid any attention to, was like the most important question. And I quickly realized, well, he's right. Yeah. And at the end of that, the whole thing goes to this dramatic scenes in the end of the Republic where this warrior dies on the battlefield and is believed in. And at the funeral, he sits up and he tells his colleagues about going to another world through a passageway and so and getting out of his body and so on. And so that was just mystifying. I mean, just startling, and never heard anything like it. So I asked Professor Hammond, what is this? And he said, yeah, these early Greek philosophers understood that some people seem to die, but then they come back and they have these experiences. And I was intrigued. I learned about Democritus also talked about these things. And so I was intrigued. And then in 1965, I'm pretty sure it was the month of February, in my philosophical topics course at night, Professor Marshall mentioned it was the seminar specific one. The question was about, the intelligibility of the question. My professor, Marshall, said, right here in town, this Dr. George Ritchie is the professor at the medical school of psychiatry, had this astonishing experience, and he told us a little about it. And what?
Oh,
So, George was very generous. He always talked to student groups and so on. So at the earliest opportunity, and I was just blown away. I mean, I think that was my first conscious experience of deity of God. I can think back on weird things that happened, like when I was 11. It was something really. Now I see, oh, that was God. Then it just opened it up. Then I began to hear I heard another guy there in Charlottesville. Then when I went to East Carolina in September of '69, started taught there for 3 years. And my favorite book is Phaedo. And so that was one of the things I taught, just love to teach.
hmm.
And there was these students were going, oh, Dr. Moody, that reminds me, I had in a car crash. And so I began to
So they started coming to you then. It wasn't so much you going to them.
no, I mean, I didn't know there was anything to go to really.
Okay.
And then my colleagues, when I talked about how these students had said these things, my colleague, yeah, that happened to me. It's like this physics professor died, and he went up above his body. I mean, all these puzzling things, and I began to see it was a pattern. So that's how it came about, and it took a long time for me to uh, uh, I still haven't. You can't draw a logical conclusion, but you can give up. I mean, I am good at thinking myself out of things, but uh, I just can't think my way out of it. It's like the conventional thing, going back to Democritus versus Plato, is to think of these things in terms of the uh, the organic versus spiritual, right? Democritus said, well, all this is, it's really the atoms in the body. The body appears dead, but there's still some biological activity. Whereas Plato said, yeah, it didn't take me a long time to get rid of that, because one of my own medical school professors told me just when I was starting that when she was trying to resuscitate unsuccessfully her mother, that she herself got out of her body, saw the scene from above, became aware of her mother there beside her, said goodbye to her mother, saw her mother recede off into this tunnel and the light. That's not oxygen deprivation to the brain, is it?
Right.
No, I mean, and not only that, this is fairly common. It's not just people who are dying. It's people who are there in the presence of the dying who have these things, including getting out of their body. They'll sometimes see the spirit of the dying person leave in the form of a cloud or an indescribable mist.
Yes.
They may even get out of their body and go along with their loved one toward the light, then come back.
And for people for whom this is a new idea, this is often called the shared death experience.
Shared
Correct?
death experiences.
Yeah.
Right. And so how do you think your way out? And then from a purely, I guess, personal limitation, this is the situation I am. I have probably a couple of dozen friends over the years, medical doctors who've had these experiences.
Yeah.
Right. And I ask myself, would I go to, if I had a foot injury to me is a horror, Nathan, because I'm addicted to walking.
And you've just been through one. You had a bout with gout, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh my God, I almost died. But just the gosh awful prospect of having an injury that I couldn't exercise. And now, if something did happen to my foot, would I take my body and life to Dr. Chikoria, right? An orthopedic surgeon who's had a near-death experience and told me it's real, not only real, but realer than this.
Yeah.
Right? And now you could say that with a dozen other people, Eben, Alexander, or just a lot of friends of mine who are medical doctors whose judgment I trust, who tell me unanimously that, yeah, I did this near-death experience and it was real. I mean, it was not a dream. It was the opposite of a dream.
Right.
It makes this we're living a dream.
Yeah.
And so, you see, I realized that David Hume pointed out, by the mere light of reason, it seems difficult to prove the immortality of the soul. And, he's right, let's face it. And then he says, some new species of logic is required for that purpose, and some new faculties of the mind that they may enable us to comprehend that logic. And that is accurate, right? The statement. He meant it as irony, and what he was saying is it's impossible. But when I read that statement in 1964, I saw that he was right, but also that he was right in what he said, but he was wrong in his unstated assumption that it was impossible. Because it seemed by then I was understanding that you can think logically about unintelligible things just like you can think logically about intelligible things. It's just that instead of just paying attention to rules, as we do with meaningful language, we have to start thinking of meta rules, like what makes something nonsensical is a meta rule. And it's that every kind of nonsense follows some of the rules of language and breaks others so that the outcome is unintelligible. An example, okay? 'Twas brillig and the slithy toads did gyre and gimble in the wave. That's nonsense, right? But just think about it for a minute. It those words we can see are meaningless, but ask yourself, do they sound like um, uh, Polish words or Czech words or Italian words or no? They sound like English words.
Yeah.
Right? So they are obeying the accepted rules of word formation in English. And they are also obeying the grammatical rules, because you can tell 'twas brillig and the slithy toves. What part of speech is slithy? Obviously an adjective.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so but it violates the rule that when you use only terms that have a lexical meaning that the person can decide. See, so it's like it's nonsense is paradoxically more highly structured than ordinary meaningful language, because to understand the meaning of a certain piece of meaningful, intelligible language, all you need to do um, is to know the rules. To analyze a piece of nonsense, you need to have to go by a meta rule, and that is that you look at which specific rules of language it follows, like the word formation rules, the grammar rules, and also which particular rules it breaks. You see, and that's that every kind of nonsense has that particular pattern. Every one that I found.
You're reminding me of one of the souls that came to me. Do you remember Hester Prynne in The Scarlet Letter?
Yeah.
Who was forced to wear this big red A because she was an adulteress. Well, Paul came to me in a dream and showed me driving driving a car into a lake. In the early 50s, he had just graduated high school and was on a double date and had borrowed his grandmother's car. The couple in the back wanted a place to make out. And so he pulled down a dark road, and he thought he was driving over a wooden bridge, but it turned out to be a pier. And he drove the car into the lake and killed them all, like a week after they graduated high school. So in his afterlife, he became -4 man, and he wore like a shirt that said -4. He had just graduated high school, so the Scarlet Letter was on his mind, and he felt like he didn't deserve anything good in the afterlife because he robbed the earth of 4 young lives. He tried to go to the funerals, and he said it was just too awful, and so he created a place in the afterlife that was just about his shame. But then he had some helpers who got him to the point where we came into play, and he was grinding and grinding and grinding away at the nonsense of his death. How could my life and 3 other lives have died so stupidly? And in the end, the guy that was helping that day, it was his first time to ever be a prayer partner of mine. He said, you haven't seen the other 3 since you died, right? It sounds like they all finished crossing. You're the only one that stayed behind. It's and then he went to algebra, and he said, think of of death as the equal sign in the middle, and there's terms on both sides of the equal sign, and you have to get them to cross. And if you have -4 plus 3, you add +3 on both sides, that cancels out, and then there's only -1. And he said, I never thought of it that way. And then when it came time to cross, his high school principal showed up with a football jersey with a 1 on it, and it was gold and purple, their school colors. And he said, he's asking me to put this on, and we're going to cross the equal sign. You're going to go from being -1 to +1, and we'll get this over with. So for him, it was algebra that helped him in a conundrum that helped him move in the afterlife.
Yeah.
It wasn't really linguistic logic, any spoken word. And he said, I always like math better because with words, sometimes they mean more than one thing. That's why you have dictionaries. You go and look up a word, and sometimes it has 6 or 7 different meanings. He said, 4 always is 1 more than 3 and 1 less than 5. I'd much rather deal with numbers. So that helped him in the afterlife, dealing with numbers. It got him out of that. looping
Okay.
thinking.
Let's hope he got to meet Pythagoras.
I don't know if he has yet, but I'll suggest it to him the next time I pray with him.
Great.
Yeah. He was only 18, so he hadn't really done anything much in the afterlife, but when we met him, because he was still stuck in this loop about how he died. Anyway, you made me think of him. Well, tell me, we're near the end of our time together. The theme of my show, it's called the Joyful Friar because Saint Dominic was his nickname. And when I started looking at the different options of how to be a Catholic priest, a lot of them have pain and suffering in their name. And I just thought life has enough of that without me making a theme out of it. When I learned that Dominic was a joyful friar, I said, that's the group I want to be a part of. I want to be on the joy team. So when it came time to name a podcast, I said, I want it to be the Joyful Friar. So here, Raymond, I want to know about joy, and especially for our listeners and viewers, joyful hope. It's one thing to be joyful when you've got all kind of joyful things happening in your life. I'd like to hear about how you cultivate joy even on a bad day or, whatever.
Well, I'm not really good at that often. But I'll say this.
You're a joyful guy. You live, you're natively smiling.
Yeah. How do I do that? Well, it's all about God, I think. I mean, I just sort of turn everything up, not everything, but my first impulse now is usually to turn over to God, except then I got just a minute, maybe God wants me to learn to do it myself or something.
Yeah.
And, but I try to be polite and circumspect, and considerate when I talk to God. But I mean, it's just a necessary thing for me. I just the other day in bed, just with my injury, I just forgot to. I was so it's horrible, so I just forgot to do my morning prayer, and it got later in the day, and I was anxious, And but so I did it that day, but. I mean, it's that ingrained in me that it's just part of me. And I don't understand much about prayer. Prayer is a vast subject, but I just have this one little aspect of it that I've given up on asking God to do something specific, okay? Because you know how that goes, right? Why did I ask for that? But I find it much better if you just sort of think about it, and then you just sort of maybe think through myself a little what I want to do, but then I just say, God, you take care of this. And by the way, I just am incapable of being formal with God. I just don't understand this thing about, people these and that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. God is.
Yeah. I don't use that language either.
Yeah, it's just it's fine to talk with God. You don't have to think about it. Just spill it out.
Do you ever think of God as friend?
Oh yeah. Companion.
Yes, that means one with whom you eat bread, and at Eucharist, that's I'm a priest. We take bread and wine and ask it to be consecrated and feed us.
Yeah. Well, we both know that if you bless the food beforehand and ask God to thank God for it, it tastes better.
It does. More nutritious. Good. Well, is there anything that you want to say before we wrap this up? Is there anything that interviewers never asked you that you wish they would?
Well, not really. I mean, there've been so many things over the years. I can't know any gaps. I do want to say thank you for this, and thanks so much to the people that watching and listening in. And I hope you've benefited from it. And I'm really excited. By the way, and you're probably this way too, I gather, Nathan. I'm incapable of caring about money, except it's like it's such an artificial thing. And so then because I'm not care about it, then we need it, right? And so, that's probably on most people's minds all the time. And it's 78, but it's interesting to me that I've just never had any interest in it. So therefore, when I say about my books, I'm uncomfortable with the idea that people might think I'm trying to sell them a book, right?
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah, me too.
I'm not, I'm creativity is what the books are about to me, but I like to talk about them because I got a new one that's coming out in September called Proof, and it's with Simon and Schuster. And I'm really excited about it because just, I don't know about you, but I've gotten just in the COVID years, there's been a change in the tempo of people calling me about near-death experiences, and a little difference in the population. It's now I just get all these middle-aged people, and they're suddenly turning their attention to this. There's a vast curiosity about this.
Yes.
So I've just put together a lot of information in this book with the aim of, like I said, I mean, just because a lot of people want to know about it, and there's so much information now. Somebody just finding out about near-death experiences has a lot of catching up to do.
Yes, and as a person who you said earlier wasn't raised in a religious home in a religious tradition, but now you're anxious if you don't start the day with prayer. Raymond Moody could, for any of you for whom religion, spirituality didn't come early or naturally, here's a guy that might be able to. You might just enjoy hearing about his journey, and maybe it wouldn't be such a bad place to end up if they were beside you, Raymond. You have a recent book called God is Bigger Than the Bible. That was March of 2021. It's a very easy read. For people that are daunted by reading, it's not a difficult book to read, and it just answers practical questions about life with God.
Yeah, God is neat. And, some people just sort of put religion between them and God, not intending consciously, but that's what it ends up doing. I mean, I just don't think God cares about anybody's beliefs.
Well, I love etymology, and belief is from the word beloved. And so whenever I'm at mass and I need to lead the people in the creed, it starts with I believe, which is credo is Latin for I believe. And then it sounds like a checklist that you might have to go through at your doctor's office, and it drains all the life out of it. And so I often will introduce and say, remember that believing is you believe in your beloved. Do you believe in your beloved? Then after we understand that God's our beloved, now let's say this prayer together.
Believe in. That's right.
Yeah.
Not believe that, believe in.
Yes, you believe in the love of the one who loves you. Yeah. And then all these other formulations have their place. Anyway, well, I wanted to get a plug in for that book because I just read it in advance of this interview and enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
All right.
You've had some of the same thoughts and experiences.
A lot of them, and one of my dreams was to meet Raymond Moody, and I did more than meet you. I got to have a great time talking with you.
You're a wonderful guy.
All right. Well, God bless you. And thanks for being on my show. Is there a place where we can direct people, a website or anything like that in case they want to be in touch with you?
It's www.lifeafterlife.com.
Okay. Yeah. But you've made my day early in the day.
Made my day. This is just so neat. I've been sick for a week and just I feel so good today. Thank you.
Well, me too. Well, God bless you, buddy. Thanks for being a part of this episode of the Joyful Friar. If you would like to support what we do, there's on my website, it's nathan-castle.com. There's a donate button there for that purpose. And as Raymond was just saying, neither one of us is in this for the money, but we have bills to pay and people to support and so on. So it'd be very kind if you chose to do that. But anyway, if you would, if you think that this is an interview that other people would like to listen to, please share it. So until next time, God bless you all. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless. Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning, being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.